Good evening. I'm calling the special city council meeting Wednesday, June 17th, 2026, set at 7:30 to meeting. City Clerk, Madam Clerk, could you call the roll?
Councilor Ash. Councilor DeBona. Councilor Hubley.
Sorry.
Councilor Jacobs. Present. Councilor McKee. Present. Councilor Riley. Present. Councilor Ryan. Present. Councilor Yuen. Present. President Mahoney.
Present.
Welcome to City Minutes. I'm Kevin.
I'm Joe.
Joe, we're here. We're a little late on this, but we're going to discuss the June 17th, 2026 special City Council budget hearing meeting.
Yes, that's right. You know what this reminds me of, Kevin? It just occurred to me. When I was a kid, I was so dismayed to find out that like Christmas movies were often taped in the summer. Because when I was little, I always thought they're taping it like, in December when there's decorations out and everything. And then when I found out that Hollywood just taped it in the summer, it was a real letdown. And so I think recording our podcast this late is a little bit like that. But we'll still get some good stuff.
We'll still get some good stuff. There was some interesting stuff that came out of it. So I'm just going to read from today's Quincy Sun, which officially comes out tomorrow. After 1.67 million in cuts, council passes 488.46 million budget. So the 1.67 million in cuts includes approximately 1 million slashed during the final session. The largest cut made that night and the largest overall was 500,000 from the city's long-term debt budget, reducing the figure to 77.46 million. Council President Anne Mahoney proposed a cut, saying a bond with annual payments of roughly 580,000 would be coming off the books. So I think we could start probably from the beginning that night. The first one was the library budget. The director returned. I know there were some questions about her original budget figures.
That's right. So I think she might have been there on the first night even. And she was just sent away with some homework. And so on the last night of budget talks, she returned with some answers from the first night. But even then, it still wasn't adding up for some of the counselors. And so it was a little bit sludgy at first. It was off to a slow start going through the library budget.
It was. And I think part of it has to do with her not knowing the Munis system. And she had to reach out to Paul Delabauer, the finance director, and I think the city council auditor to help her.
And that's what they're there for. So, I mean, right. I'm glad that they were there to answer questions, especially the auditor. I think the auditor has been invaluable this whole process. And I think that goes to show that one of the things the counselors want is for the auditor to have more power and more influence over the budget and like reporting. And you can see why. I mean, like really, it's hard to pin down some of these numbers. And I think it would be even better if the auditor had the tools they needed to do so.
Right. And it sounds like these problems have persisted for at least a couple of years.
Oh, yeah. I'm afraid to know how long they've persisted. I don't even want to pick at that scab, really. This is why the voters made the decision to put in new counselors, because they're already improving things. Sure. The cuts were maybe moderate or even light to some people, but more importantly, the questions, the clarifications, the city is on notice now that the days of like no one checking their work are gone.
Right. I think a message was kind of sent, right?
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. So they ended up cutting 20,000 from the library personal services for that. And I think all of what they suggested to cut throughout the budget, they were looking at averages and they were trying desperately not to hurt any positions or services, right?
That's right. I mean, let's face it, that nobody wants to needlessly cost anyone a job or even half a job. And they certainly don't want their library to not be able to provide the good service and the good resources that the library does. The library is a lifeline for a lot of our residents who, there's things that, some of them can't afford their own internet, or they don't have smartphones, they don't have access, but they can go to the library and they can access all those tools. Not to mention, of course, the information, the books. There's even a library of things now where you can go and borrow a power drill. I hope our renters are taking advantage of the library of things. The library keeps evolving, and it's good.
Yeah.
One of the things that came up in the discussion with the library director, and this was the first time I've ever heard this term. I'm sure that's not because it wasn't mentioned before, but I never really paid attention to this level. But there's a term called breakage. And for what I can understand in like municipal politics, because it's not the same breakage you would get in retail. In municipal economies, breakage refers to the savings the city gets when some of your senior level employees retire or leave, and they are replaced by less expensive, cheaper, for lack of a better word, versions of that position. So if you have somebody who's been around 30 years and they retire and they were making 85,000, and you replace them with somebody making 55,000, you have like 30,000 in breakage, apparently.
Right.
And that was something that kept coming up in the library discussion. And it also can refer to savings you get from keeping a position vacant, which is,
It
I
sounds
think,
like they had one vacant for a while, right?
Right. That's something that the council was definitely taking notice of. They were saying, well, you haven't had this position filled in X amount of years. It feels like you don't need this position. Maybe we can cut this position from the budget, and of course, the directors, the department heads, they're not going to want that, because their hope is to fill that position eventually and have their department run even better. Or maybe there's people that have been picking up the slack for the past couple of years, and you're really hoping to fix that. So that's okay, but they have to be ready to speak to that. They have to be ready to speak to why they haven't been able to fill the position and what they're going to do, or what the hiring of someone new is going to accomplish for the taxpayers.
Right. So the next thing I think we wanted to talk about was the budget review process. I know Councilor Yuan had a problem with updated financial reports being distributed shortly before the meeting, right?
Yeah, from what I could tell, Councilor Yuan had done a lot of homework, and she had a lot of questions, as she does. And then as she started going down those questions, someone kept saying, "Oh, that number's changed." Or, I'm paraphrasing here. And she was confused because she's looking at her notes. She's looking at all the homework she did. And then the auditor's like, "Oh, yeah, we gave out a new version of this document a couple hours ago that has updated numbers." And that was kind of like disrupting the flow of the conversation. Because, if you wait until a couple of hours before the meeting starts and then give them all new numbers, it kind of puts them in an awkward position, because now they're asking about numbers that don't exist anymore or have changed. And so it can kind of like accidentally hide some of the inconsistencies. And I'm not saying anything was done strategically or by design. What I'm saying is, though, because of that, it was disrupting Councilor Yuan's ability to focus in on some of the line items that she found off, because all of a sudden her numbers have moved, and she doesn't know if those new numbers make more sense, less sense, the same sense. And so she really made the point that, going forward, we need to have solid numbers earlier than this. You can't wait till a couple hours before the meeting and then dump all new numbers on people. And I think the auditor was just trying to give them the most accurate information. But because it was coming in so late, it was making it hard for them to perform their oversight.
Right.
So basically, it comes down to how should this information be given to the counselors? And I'm sure the counselors are going to have a lot of input on that over the coming year. Because one thing that's pretty clear to me is the budget thing might have been a 2-night process for the previous council, but it's going to be a 12-month process, or at least 9 months process for this council. This council is going to be looking at the budget on a monthly basis. They're going to want to hear from department heads throughout the year, and they're going to want reports from the auditor throughout the year. So it's going to be a little different to begin with. And they tried to do it this year. As we approach budget season, they put out a call for a thorough financial review in preparation for budget season. But there was just so much going on that just didn't happen. But I think you can be sure that once we get past the holidays, they're going to be looking towards budget time immediately, and they're going to be making sure that they have those numbers well in advance.
Yeah, and I think that's part of, what they just passed, strengthening the auditors, what she can look for, basically, all kinds of information, so they can get a handle on the budget way before late May, whatever.
I have people reach out to me who say they were a little disappointed. They thought there would be more cuts. And what I've said is, I know what you're saying, but keep in mind, this was their first budget. Okay, they needed to get a feel for what's going on in the city. They needed to get a feel for how things are being done. They weren't going to fix the city in one swing. Right. But I think you're going to see next year a more aggressive approach from them. If this year, what they basically did was they poked at the budget, looking for the weak spots. They were looking for spots where money wasn't spent, that got eventually clawed back by the administration into free cash. They were on the lookout for that, because that's one good way to cut down on spending right away, is to eliminate where the free cash is hidden throughout the budget. And so if they saw that, 4 years in a row, you've had this number put in for this line item and it's never spent, I don't think you need that. And so that's where a lot of the 1.6 million came from. So, I mean, that's a good start. And then next year, they're going to be even more familiar.
Yeah. The next thing I wanted to talk about was the downtown district, the DIF fund.
I'm hoping you can explain it, because I'll be honest, it's fuzzy to me.
I'll do my best. So the DIF is a way for the city to use new property tax money created by development in a specific area, the downtown, to pay for improvements in that same area. What was happening was, it looked like they were commingling the funds. Some of the general fund was being used to finance some of those projects in the downtown.
I see. So do you know what Anne and the council did to prevent that? Or did they do something to try to prevent that?
Well, this came up during ENC too, because they didn't know if the DIF truly was paying for itself, right? Because
right,
commingled. So there is a recommended procedure, I guess, on the books that you're supposed to have a separate account for DIF. So that's basically what they set up. So Chris Walker announced it. They set up a DIF capital projects account for DIF-related offsets. So where revenue from DIFs will be set aside for debt service, band premiums, and any offsets. So they'll be paid for out of this fund. So there's clarity on the DIF, the actual revenue, ensuring there is a clarity on DIF from actual revenues. That is a big deal, because it's basically taking $900,000 from the general fund and putting it back onto the DIF. So the DIF is now going to pay for this downtown group that services Hancock, Adams, Common, and all these pocket parks. That department, I think there's Mary Cahill is the director, and then I think there's 7 employees total. That was being paid out of the general fund. I think you've probably heard it. When they set it up, basically the downtown was going to pay for itself. they're paying for it out of the general fund, taxpayers are paying for it. That's not the way it's supposed to work. So now it's going to be paid for through the DIF, which is the way it should have been to begin with.
I think I'm getting what you're putting down. And you know me, I like my analogies. So basically, if you have a 16-year-old kid in your house who's starting to drive, and you say, yeah, you can drive, but you got to pay for your own gas, your own insurance, and all that. But you keep paying the gas card bill out of the family checking account, and the insurance is still on your policy. It's real possible that they're not actually paying their way. And so what I'm hearing is Anne is very concerned that we don't know if the downtown is actually generating the tax revenue to pay for itself, or it's all been commingled to the point where we can't tell that.
Right. If the taxpayers are truly funding it now.
Right. Okay. So, all right. Well, now I kind of get what you're getting at here, because I knew Anne was onto something by the way she was talking about it. And when Councilor Mahoney is like on the trail of something, the pace of her speech gets pretty quick. So I was trying to keep up.
So I think that is a big win for everybody.
Yeah.
So Joe, the next thing I want to talk about was short-term debt. Anne Mahoney did propose a $500,000 cut. It passed 8-1. The one dissenting vote was Councilor DeBona, who didn't trust the math. And I don't know if you want to play a little bit.
Let's take a listen there.
Madam Chair, just for clarification, so 149,662, is that correct, Mr. Della Barbara?
That I'll need to verify with the strategic asset manager who provided these figures to Michael Rowland, who was building the budget. So I'll follow up and I'll follow up with Hilltop Securities, and we'll get the number correct. And if I have to come back to the body to adjust that in the fall, I will.
Okay. I know you don't know, but how can you guess that that's the right number, or you just don't know?
Well, I'm looking at a couple of different schedules now. So the Hilltop set to over 2 or 3. So I will have a phone call with Cindy McNerney at Hilltop Securities. But for the sake, again, the budget passed, I would accept that cut and ask the body that if it does need to be increased, that I can come back in the fall and ask for that, as these are contractual obligations, and we should get it right.
Through you to Councilor or President Mahoney, where did you get this number from? Is it Hilltop?
Hilltop Securities, it's online, you can get it. So band interest for fiscal year 27, as I said, was $8,511,109.10. Then there's going to be another band interest for fiscal year 2027 for $17,640,499.19 for a total band interest of $26,151,608.29, less your bond premiums of $6,434,888.15, and less your second bond premiums of $4,032,563.49 for a total interest of $15,684,156.65. With the new balance that we have here, it's going to be $149,662 less than what the new budget was created at.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
I'm going to be against that. I don't feel comfortable with the math. So
That's fine.
You wanted him to guess.
Councilor DeBon is a no on that. Anyone else opposed? All those are in favor? Okay. 8-1.
I love that. So what's interesting about that clip to me, I don't know if you can hear it real closely, because I don't want to take credit for this observation, because Councilor Mahoney actually says it right there in the clip. When after they spell out the math, the arithmetic, like a word problem, and it's real dry listening, you know, you're just hearing strings of numbers, but basically what they're doing is they're doing the math right there up on the dais. And this was after Councilor DeBona was asking for the number. He says, I'm not comfortable with that math. And all it was addition.
Right.
But the funny thing is, if you listen after he says that, you can hear it. Counselor Mahoney says, "You asked him to guess."
Right. Earlier, he had asked, Councilor DeBona had asked Finance Director Della Barbara to guess.
It's kind of remarkable because he went from being comfortable with Director Della Barbara guessing at our debt to being uncomfortable that when it was spelled out with a calculator in front of him. So that's
yeah. The other interesting thing that came out of that discussion on short-term debt was Anne and Susan had discovered during the weekend that we are indeed $2 billion in debt. And it wasn't disputed by the finance director.
We were provided this hilltop security report in April. This page 295 and in section 1046 showed the long-term debt is 1,362,912,350, and then you have an authorized and issued debt 708.6 million. If you add these two together, it's 2,071,512,350.
Councilor Mahoney?
And just for clarification, that's really the thing that's frustrating to this council. We're asking for this information. We're asking for the mayor and the administration to bring it to us so that we can make an intelligent decision when we're making decisions, whether it's ENC or fire gear or anything we're doing. And to have your consultants in front of us and to have them not give us a forecast that they should be giving to you, or to tell us that the city's in great shape and it's got tremendous flexibility and it doesn't matter about having a downgrade in S&P because we can make it up, and then having them finally say at the end, what you have to do is build your reserves and maybe use your excess levy, which means tax everybody. That's not a good place to be. And, you know, I realize that there's a lot of people out there just calling us saying you made the wrong decision, but we have $2 billion worth of debt, and we didn't get that information up here. We had to dig, and that's why I was saying it was like forensic accounting that we've been doing.
Yeah, they wanted Finance Director Della Barbara to, you know, confirm that we are over $2 billion in debt, and he did, but it kind of had to be extracted. It wasn't something that was being volunteered. And it's another indication of we need this council, and the voters knew it on some level, and they put people in there who were going to dig this stuff up because we weren't getting the straight story.
Right. And I will say that I think that the relationship between the new finance director and the city council, while it got off to a rocky start, is they are feeling more comfortable with each other, wouldn't you say?
Oh yeah, I think
one of the cooperative department heads.
Yeah, I think he seems like a genuinely nice person.
Right.
I think he wants to do a good job. I think he wants to have the right numbers. I don't feel like he's trying to spin us around. I think he's in a tough spot. You know, I don't think the administration wants him, you know, shouting from the rooftops that we're $2 billion in debt. And I think he wants to help the council figure this out.
Yeah. The only other thing I was thinking that came out during this was, again, Councilor DeBona brought up the $485 million pension fund and how it was such a good thing. And Councilor Jacobs brought up that, you know, debt is debt. Even if you back out the $485 million, we're still $1.6 billion in debt.
Yeah.
Right. And then Councilor Yuan brought up, you know, it's still being driven by market forces. So we lost $90 million in during COVID. Currently, Director Della Barbara said that he thinks it's 100% financed now. So
if you owe X amount of dollars on your mortgage, you owe X amount of dollars on your mortgage. You don't keep saying but I refinanced and it could have been worse. You know,
Right.
like you still owe what you owe. And if the pension obligation bond proves out to be a good decision, I don't think anyone's going to withhold credit to the mayor. This obviously was the mayor's idea, along with Mr. Mason before, and it might prove to be a very good move that we're thankful for. The bottom line is we are still deeply in debt, even with the pension obligation bond. As Councilor Jacobs pointed out, like, okay, let's take that out of the equation. We're still, you know, a 1.5 billion in debt, and that, you know, it's still too much.
So I think the next part that we want to talk about is the city solicitor was up, and I think we're getting into areas that we both understand maybe a little more.
So one of the things that was on that night's agenda for the budget was the legal department, which is run by the city solicitor. There's a few different things that he oversees. One of them is the legal budget. Another one is workman's comp, court judgments. I guess that's technically separate from the legal budget. But it all comes under Solicitor Timmons' purview. And
Right.
so he's talking about the budget structure. He's saying that there's 3% salary adjustments, and that's pretty much all he's asking for. I think is everything else he's asking for everything to stay level. I personally think that the legal department should have a very lean budget, and they should not have a budget for outside counsel. I think before they start suing anyone, before they hire outside counsel or do any extracurriculars with in court, I think they should have to come before the city council. I think he should have to explain what he needs the money for, what the city is getting for this, and have them approve a budget at that point. He says at some point, if you know, when I think it was Councilor Jacobs said, "I want to cut the budget."
He made the proposal to cut from the outside counsel line item, initially seeking to reduce it by 86,000 from 195,000 to 109,000. Jacob said Timmons could come back before the council if he needed additional money.
Right. Solicitor Timmons, you know, he's been doing this a long time. He's very adept at arguing. You know, that's what he's there for. And he said, "Why do you want to do that?" And you know, Councilor Jacobs said, "Because I'd like you to have to come back and see us and report to us and tell us what's going on." And Solicitor Timmons says, "Oh, you don't need to cut my budget to do that. You can ask me to come in and give a report at any time." Right. And I was jumping out of my seat. I was going crazy because that's not the point. The point is, by the time he already comes and reports, he's already committed the city to a lawsuit or to a legal action. It's already been done. And so at that point, he's reporting what's happened instead of what he wants to do or what he thinks the city needs to do. And that's just not good enough. So I didn't even think Councilor Jacobs' cut was even steep enough. And then they ended up really, you know, peeling it back, the cut. And
43,000.
Yeah. So Councilor Hubley and Councilor Ash were both saying,
I can tell you what Councilor Ash said. He said he was opposed to the cut because it could impact the city's ability to respond to legal matters in a time.
Yeah, that's malarkey, and I'll tell you why. The lawyers, they don't bill you right away. So there's no reason that they couldn't get a lawyer engaged, sign an engagement letter, get in front of the city council, and get the budget approved, and give the people of Quincy a say in what legal matters that they're spending our money on. And Councilor Jacobs asked about this. I'm going to bring it up, and with full disclosure, I'm involved in this lawsuit. Take everything I'm saying with that lens. I'm trying to speak here as a citizen and not a plaintiff, but just so you know, I do have a stake in what this lawsuit's about. But the ballot petition lawsuit, the city has spent
query ahead of time. To date, the bill, the legal bill is $110,847.29. And there's been activity, so I've asked KP Law they've got to get the bills in.
110,000 and some change so far. They've said that there's more to come, that their law firm has not finished billing everything that's been done. So that 110 is an incomplete number.
Right, and Council Jacobs brought that up, and the 110,000 versus, I think Councilor Jacobs said the group that you're part of the lawsuit on has spent $20,000, and they sort of went back and forth. Solicitor Timmons saying there's a legal agency that goes around the country, so there's probably something there. When he said something, I think he's saying there's some cost there that is either being hidden or something like that, and also Harvard Legal Aid, so there's something there too. Let
me correct a lot of that. That there's some real bad misinformation there. Okay, first of all, there's no mysterious roving band of legal help that is helping this lawsuit. I think he's getting his lawsuits mixed up, to be honest with you. In the statues lawsuit, in addition to the ACLU, there's two other organizations that are providing legal assistance to the plaintiffs in that. There's the Foundation for Religious Freedom, and there's Americans United Against something religious-y. I can't remember the name off the top of my head. But those, and plus the ACLU and of Massachusetts, those three are involved in the statute lawsuit. Now, we're talking about the ballot petition lawsuit. Ballot petition lawsuit, there is two different lawsuits that have been joined together. One of them was brought by the Quincy Citizens for Fair Raises, of which I'm an officer and part of. And we have hired an attorney to help us with that lawsuit. There's another lawsuit filed by just general citizens who had their names discounted by the city. And they enlisted the Harvard Election Law Clinic, not Harvard Legal Aid. That's a different thing. The Harvard Election Law Clinic, it took on their lawsuit. So there's two standalone, freestanding lawsuits that were combined in the court against the city about certifying the ballot petition. Now, here's where Mr. Timmons is wrong again. Those were freestanding lawsuits, meaning it's not like Harvard took half the lawsuit and our lawyer took half the lawsuit and they each did half the work. Even if that were the case, if you split the bill in half for the city so far, it's still way more than what the plaintiffs have spent. But that's not what happened anyway. We have a full functioning lawsuit, completely separate from Harvard's lawsuit, and we have spent $16,000. That is not 20. No offense to Councilor Jacobs, he was guessing or estimating based off of conversations he's had with people, but we had not spent $20,000. We had spent $16,000 on legal fees. The city has spent $110,000. It's obscene. The taxpayers of this city are paying. They're paying a lot of money to fight to try to keep people's voices from being heard through that petition. So I find that offensive, obviously.
Yeah.
Not only that, they lose. Which I'm glad about.
Going away. I mean, most people predicted that
yeah.
they would lose.
I mean, you didn't have to be a legal expert to think they were going to lose this case. Most people did think they were going to lose this case. I don't know what the future holds because you learn these things. My first lawsuit, there are a million different ways to appeal lawsuits. I don't know what the future holds, and that's fine. I'm fine not knowing right now. But all I know is the taxpayers of Quincy have paid a lot of money fighting their own citizens' right to petition their government. And so I didn't want that to happen anymore. I want the legal budget trimmed so that they have to come back before council and say, we need money if we're going to fight this. And then the council could have said do you have a good case? Tell me your case, because it doesn't sound like you have a good case. Let's not spend that money, you know? But anyway, Solicitor Timmons did still keep the majority of his budget, and I don't think he'll have to come back before council before he does any more legal actions, and that, I think that's an opportunity missed. But it is what it is.
Yep, there was one other point that I wanted to, when Councilor Jacobs was going over the fees, he also mentioned the lawyers. So there's, I think, 4 lawyers, City Solicitor Timmons, the 2 other solicitors, and this other solicitor that I guess has left. So they're looking to fill his position. Plus KP Law is the outside firm. But Timmons corrected him, saying that the 4 lawyers, city lawyers, had to basically recuse themselves because, you know, they couldn't argue for someone that's basically employing them, right?
Yeah.
And so Councilor Jacobs came back and found it interesting that, you know, the pay raise petition versus the conversation they had weeks ago about repeal and delete. And he didn't understand why that was not a conflict.
Our office was conflicted out of that case.
Okay.
The case about a ballot petition relating to the mayor's salary, and the 4 people you mentioned are all appointees of the mayor. We had to get outside counsel for that reason. Many times we have to get outside counsel because of conflicts.
Well, that's one of the things that, like, going back to the salary, that I don't understand, because, you know, you came up here a couple of weeks ago and talked about, like, repeal versus delete, and we're going to get into that in a couple of days. But, you know, over here, you know, you're talking about how we couldn't get into this signature case because we're appointees of the mayor and it had to do with this pay raise. So I don't even understand how you guys can come up here and talk about the ordinance regarding the pay raise, because it's in your best interest, and I'm not saying this happened, but it's in this department's best interest to make the language in that ordinance, you know, the most beneficial terms for the person who employs you, which is the mayor.
To be honest, I didn't know that's why Solicitor Timmons wasn't trying the ballot case himself. I actually thought he hired outside counsel because KP Law had more experience with election law. I guess I should have questioned that more, because it seemed to me it's strange that a municipal lawyer wouldn't be well versed on election law.
I think KP Law does have more experience, and that's why they use them. I don't think it had anything to do with recusing themselves. But.
Well, right. But I mean, like, that's what I had always thought, that KP Law, you know, was just going to do a better job. I don't know why that wasn't what was said the other night. He said that we had to recuse because there was a conflict. And well, then every discussion you've ever had defending the raises was a conflict. That memo you wrote that we affectionately call the Timmons memo, that basically gave an opinion that they didn't think the ballot petition was legal, was a conflict.
Yeah.
So it seems strange that all of a sudden, you know, the conflict prevented him from doing this trial himself. I think the real truth is he thought they would get better work from KP Law.
Yeah, and I think he was trying to downplay Councilor Jacobs' point that 4 internal lawyers versus this outside law firm that specializes in it was basically beaten by a law student and essentially a free lawyer. I wouldn't call him free, but compared to their
Well,
fees.
I mean, our lawyer definitely wasn't free, but he was very generous with us. And it was nice because our lawyer is near retirement. And he took this on because he thought our case was interesting, and he thought what we were doing was pretty cool. Yeah. And I think that's an exact quote. And then so we had that a lawyer who is near retirement, who's been doing election law for decades on one end, and then the other lawsuit had a bunch of young, optimistic activists. So we had like two two extremes on a spectrum here, and that's who tried the cases. And our lawyer did a lot of work on it himself, but obviously we at QCFR had to do a lot of preparation. We kind of became our own paralegals. We were, helping create exhibits. We were working in Excel. Like we had to do a lot of the work that I'm pretty sure KP Law was doing for the city. We had to do it, and that's part of the reason we did it so efficiently. When you hire outside firms, you are going to get nickel and dimed. That is just the truth of the matter. I have some experience in this from working at MIT. When we use outside counsel, we know it's going to cost more than if we use inside counsel. And so we try to use inside counsel whenever we could. Anyway, I think Solicitor Timmons, even though he kept most of his budget, I think he probably got a message that the taxpayers need to have some return on investment for some of this.
Right. Okay, so the next thing I wanted to talk about was the community liaison position. Are you familiar with that position?
Yeah, I'm a little bit familiar with. I'm not really sure about what the community liaison does day to day, but I remember the whole thing that led up to the hiring of that position.
Right. So Councilor McKee, I think, is a similar boat that you are in. She questioned what this position does. Is it really paying off, I guess? What you alluded to was it was originally supposed to be a DEI position, but the mayor didn't like that term, I guess. So there was some kind of compromise where they came up with this community liaison, which seemed to a lot of us was like a watered down position, to be honest.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm just gonna say it, like, because we're recording this kind of late. So back in 2020, I think it was. People remember we were in the midst of COVID. The George Floyd tragedy happened. People were calling for reforms across the country, and it was no different in Quincy. Quincy had a band of citizens who wanted to see some improvements. They really wanted a department. They wanted a couple people to be working on representation within the government, making sure that people of color were getting the services they need, that they felt comfortable coming and asking for service. The thing was, there was no real accusations at the city. There was no real condemnation of the city. It was just like, this is a hole. This is something we could use, and we should invest in it. But the administration really took offense to the whole thing. I just remember them saying that we don't have this problem in Quincy. This isn't something that we struggle with. And long story short, they ended up hiring someone they changed the title of the position. They didn't get the department. It kind of quieted down after that. The whole world had other things on their mind. There was a change in national politics, and things kind of settled down. But this person's been there, and we don't really know what they're doing. And sometimes just asking for stuff like that seems to trigger defensive postures in the city.
So Councilor McKee started this process, but she said she'd give the role one more year. And but Councilor Yuan, we've talked quite a bit about tonight. During the discussion on the mayor's budget, Yuan made motion to eliminate the position of community liaison. The position was a salary of $92,564 in FY27, up from $89,868. Yuan said the position was redundant with others in the mayor's office. She said the mayor's office also has a director of communications, and you have constituent services. She said, I just feel a community liaison is kind of redundant, and we don't want the government to become bigger and bigger.
Yeah, I mean, I think Councilor McKee, her point of view towards the end of the conversation was actually more conservative. And I don't mean fiscally conservative, but Councilor McKee was like, until we know more, and it does sound like this person has some initiatives they're working on, let's let's keep everything as is for another year, and we'll spend that year finding out more about the position, finding out more about what they're up to. And then if we're not happy with what we're getting for that line item, then that might be it for that position. And I guess I get that.
So after everyone weighed in, basically saying, let's give him one more year, give him some goals, get him before the council, she withdrew her cut. So that position has one more year to basically prove its worth, I guess.
Yeah. And you know what? That person who has that position, if they want to keep it, they know what they have to do. They know they have to get to know the council, make sure the council knows what they're doing, make sure that the people of Quincy are getting return on investment. And if they do that, then they might be fine. They probably will be fine. But you can only do that if there really is some there.
Yeah. I think Councilor Mahoney brought up that, we really don't know. This person may be asking for things that everybody wants, but we don't know. And so if we work with him and help him find the information he wants, or to build the department he wants that everyone else had hoped for, then maybe we can get there. So,
yeah.
Do you have any final takeaways on the overall budget picture?
Well, yeah. I mean, not to be a broken record, but I think the council continued showing that they are now a fiscal oversight body. They took the charge given to them by the people that put them in there, the voters, and they are taking to it. They are going to ask questions. They are going to push past the cringy moments. They're going to push past the uncomfortable moments, and they are going to ask the questions that the voters have. And I think that, is a breath of fresh air. And also, they improved the budget. They didn't just cut it. Like there are some of their amendments and the changes through the questioning and that process, they moved some things around and they saved some money, and they fixed some mistakes. And it's showing that this process isn't just there to cut, it's there to improve the budget, which I think is great.
And I think now these department heads know what to do next year, so they can probably make some of these cuts themselves, right? Beforehand.
Yeah, that's what I'm expecting. I'm not going to go in there and have my budget cut right in front of my face. I'm going to, the line items that they leave in their budget are going to be ones that they can speak to and defend. And I think that's good.
Right. Final thing we want to get to is, of course, Councilor Anne Mahoney. I know her pretty well. Her remonstrance or point of privilege regarding Mayor Koch's comments. So what is a remonstrance?
Well, I'm glad you asked, because I had to look it up. And because I've heard this referred to in council meetings, and I've always kind of been like, what are we talking about? So a remonstrance is basically a protest. It's formal. It's a serious complaint against some sort of decision, for lack of a better word. I mean, this is why it's wrong. And so Anne had a remonstrance at the end of this meeting. And
I'm not sure she called it a remonstrance, but that's what she was doing. She called it, I think, a point of privilege or something like that.
So what was she talking about?
Of course, the ANC vote was 2 days earlier. And of course, Mayor Koch is interviewed by Joe Catalano on Tuesdays following these meetings. He said that it was orchestrated by the city council president, that's Anne. And they had also, and I have the Quincy Sun in front of me, reached for a comment Tuesday after the vote. Koch told the Sun, "It is clear to me it was all orchestrated by the council president. Their comments were all prepared. There was no debate." That's what he said. Twice, basically, he said that twice. Mahoney responded to these comments during the early morning hours. It was like 12:30 on June 18th, shortly after the councilors passed the budget for fiscal year 2027. She said the claim the vote was orchestrated was an insult to the body. The mayor stated the vote was orchestrated by me. I have to be honest, I found the statement really insulting, not to me, but to every member of this council. The suggestions that 6 elected officials cannot think for themselves, review information, ask questions, and independently reach the same conclusion is offensive to this body and to the residents who elected us. And this is a key point. I'm one vote, one. I do not hire people. I do not award contracts. I do not grant tax incentives. I do not control appointments. I don't have the ability to reward people for agreeing with me or punishing them for disagreeing with me. What I do have is a responsibility to ask questions, and I make no apologies for doing exactly that. So the point she's making here is maybe Mayor Koch is projecting a little bit. He can orchestrate things, right? He can pull strings. She can't.
Yes, he can.
I mean, these people work their butts off to get elected. They knock doors. Or there's a rumor out there that the voter turnout was low. It wasn't low, it was higher. There are people out there that are mad at these councilors, but what these councilors did, every wannabe elected official should do. So the thought that they would do all that work and just agree with this council president, because why? She smiles at them, slaps them in the back? I don't understand. So
No, I mean, I'll tell you, I don't know how I missed this. It's so surprising to me to hear that, because it doesn't sound like he watched any of the meetings, because these people met, they talked for hours about that suggested purchase. She's right, it is insulting, but also it just shows me the mayor has had this stranglehold on the city through a compliant city council for years now. Once Anne left the city council, it became a 9-0 council. But even before that, it was an 8-1 council a lot of the time. Mm-hmm. And so he's just really unaccustomed to democracy working the way it's supposed to work. You're not supposed to have a 9-0 council. Democracy isn't set up for that, because you don't have this oversight. And we just spent an hour talking about how this oversight has improved the budget and how it's helping the city. And so he's not accustomed to it. He's accustomed to theater. He's accustomed to people pretending that they're considering, and then they vote the way he wants. So that really, I wonder if he really feels that way, or he was just sour, because that's just really wrong. And so I'm glad Anne did formally protest it through a remonstrance.
I'll just sum it up with her last quote here. But respect is built on trust, and trust requires honesty. When councilors ask legitimate questions
and are accused of obstructing progress, that erodes trust. When information is repeatedly requested and arrives late, trust erodes. When concerns are dismissed instead of addressed, trust erodes. And when 6 independently elected councilors are accused of being orchestrated because they reached a conclusion that the administration didn't like, trust erodes. The administration is entitled to disagree with the outcome. What it's not entitled to do is to question the independence or integrity of a council just because the result wasn't what they wanted. The reality is much simpler. 6 councilors reviewed the information. 6 councilors reviewed the risks. 6 councilors reached the same conclusion. That's not an orchestration, that's a representation. Responsible people can disagree about the outcome of a vote, but nobody should question the motive. The motive was simple: protect the taxpayers. Demand transparency, ask the questions that are needed to be asked, and do the job that you were elected to do. Every councilor who voted Monday night owns that vote, and I respect that. I think the mayor should too. Thank you.
You're here. I think they get convinced that any disagreement is personal, and they don't seem to acknowledge that people can disagree on the merits of an idea. If they disagree, it's because they don't like me. It doesn't make sense. They're not going through all the grief that comes with this. Why would you go through all that just to spite? Doesn't make sense. They didn't vote for ENC because they didn't think it was the right thing for the city. Period.
Right.
So, well, that's good. Well, you know what? We still have one more meeting to dissect, but I'm looking forward to that. But I think for now, I think we've covered the final budget meeting as well as we can, and so I think we'll reconvene when it's time to go over the final meeting of the year.
That does it for now for this edition of
City Minutes.
Thanks, everybody.
See you in a minute.